Hello, folks. We're back to these video lectures. I'm going to talk about section 2 and its addressing of the bureaucratic model. Now, we've talked about this in the introduction, so we'll start out giving some information about the bureaucratic model, but most importantly, we'll see some writing in that using that paradigm. For example, Weber will talk about it and some others. And you'll see some of the conflicts there also. So let's get started. I bring up these PowerPoints to give you something that you can download and use. These are the same PowerPoints that are online in the Canvas site, so you can use them as you need them, because that's what they're there for. Anyway, so let's do the slideshow from the beginning. The bureaucratic organizational form. All right. Characteristics of bureaucratic organizational form. It's designed to segment workers into functional specializations. Nowadays, we actually call these silos. But these functional areas like accounting or marketing, they're unique areas with unique knowledge and skills. So under the bureaucracy model, we would want to group those people together for more efficient service. A communication occurs within the functional stovepipes or silos, but across functions, it's only carried out at the top level of management. Frontline workers have a little bit of autonomy within their silo. Okay, so keep thinking of these silos, because, and you might work in an organization that's like this. The accounting people don't talk to the marketing people. The direct service providers don't actually work with another area of the organization, and so on. There is some advantages to these kinds of bureaucratic models. Now, we talked about these before, but now there's reliance on formal relationships, keeps people from, putting their kids into the jobs or favoring their friends. It promotes fairer treatment of workers and clients. These formal rules or formalization enables scalability and replication. Now, probably the best example of this is an army. During peacetime, they're a smaller, leaner organization, but they have all of these policy and procedures in place so that if they need to, they can scale up to fight a war and then scale back down. It's an efficient organizational form when an environment is slow-moving, predictable. You do the same thing every day. And there, the post office is really the model for that. But this lacking of horizontal discussion, cross-functional relationships, except at top management, really does harm the organization. If something's going on down in the ranks, it's hard for it to go up and then over and then down to try to get problems solved. So there's a problem with coordination. Workers really don't gain an overview of everything in the organization. They get to know their little specialty. And that harms their career possibilities, because they really can only go in one silo. They can't necessarily horizontally or laterally transfer, as it's known. And it makes it so that the organization is less flexible. People aren't cross-trained. Now, when you look at these theories, there are people that say that they're really good things, they're bad things. Look, nobody agrees on everything. But this idea that bureaucracy minimizes horizontal flows of information, there's agreement and there's disagreement, because the people that disagree say the consequences are the real issue. So whether or not and under what conditions the advantages of the organizational form outweigh its disadvantages. So you have people all over the place arguing for it, against it, part of it, etc. So what comes out of that are some hybrid alternatives. Different theorists over the years. Now remember, Weber was over 100 years ago, and over time people have said, here are some different ways to approach bureaucracy that allow you to use the best parts of it and maybe mitigate some of the dysfunctional parts. So matrix organization, interactive, collaborative community, enabling feminist bureaucracy even. These are all discussed in your text. All right, so here's the first article. Now remember, this book is filled with original articles from these folks. And Max Weber, I know it looks like Weber, but it's Weber, almost is said with a V because it's German. But he wrote this article called Bureaucracy. And the principles include, and you will recognize your organization, formal rules, functional specialization, hierarchy, professionalism. Now there's advantages to formal rules. Again, disposition, equalizing workers, etc. There's some advantages to functional specialization. The division of labor can actually increase people's productivity. People get to master a single integrated function in the organization, and that can help. The hierarchy without domination, unified control to achieve goals. Power is legitimate within the organization. It's based upon these functional roles. It's not based upon personal relationships. Okay? And professional workers are obliged to and governed by requirements of their roles, not personal relationship. And then this is Weber talking. Remember, he's going to point out the advantages. Bureaucracy is highly scalable and replicable. Do you think that he's going to point out his own failings when he's writing about it? Not really. But he does say this: once fully established, bureaucracy is among those social structures which are the hardest to destroy, because bureaucracy is the means of transforming social action into rationally organized action. He recognizes some of the issues, but that's kind of deeply embedded in that quote. Now here's our good old friend Mary Follett. She talks about coordination. Bureaucracies systematically fail to foster horizontal relationships. Now, if you were doing a paper and you wanted to talk about the pros and cons of bureaucracy, these two authors, Weber and Follett, would give you that. Because he didn't admit to any problems. He talked only about the positive things. Follett's pointing out the other side of the coin. Coordination of workers depends upon chance. Functional division overshadows responsibility for the whole. You know, everybody gets into their own little thing and doesn't necessarily worry about what we're doing as an organization. These are academics. Disrupts workers' intersubjective cognitive processes. It really affects not only their lives, not only their work, but how they think. Because people think that their function, accounting is most important thing in the world. Well, maybe not. Landsberger, the horizontal dimension in bureaucracy, does talk about this upper level of bureaucracy, how managers are critically important to have those horizontal ties. Horizontal ties help get work done in interdependent, fast-moving environments. Now, notice that he's looking at this kind of different organization than Weber talked about. Weber talked about that slower, more predictable organization. Now they're using the same ideas, but in a different context, different social environment. He also notes, Landsberger does, a criticism of Weber, overlooking the importance of these horizontal ties. And really the question becomes, can bureaucracies be more effective in fast-moving industrial settings when things are interdependent? Piore, the social embeddedness of labor markets and cognitive process. Looking at the division of labor, that the whole into separate parts. There's those silos. The division limits hermeneutic processes through which cognitive structures evolve. You can't think about the whole without understanding the other pieces. And when we're in these functional areas, it's hard to do. So the specialization limits critical and creative thinking and personal development. I brought that up just a little while ago in Follett. So notice that each of these after Weber are criticizing parts of his overall argument. Well, sorry about that. I touched the screen and the management literature talks about how you break down these barriers so that organizations have more connectiveness. And when you break down those bureaucratic barriers, you get direct, rich, and textured communication. That's at least the theory. Weber would say that that can also lead to ineffectiveness. Hochschild, defining the post-bureaucratic type. Now, each time we've seen criticisms, and each of these theorists talk about their version of what would make it better, okay? So Hochschild says bureaucracy segments work. The segmentation of work wastes some workers' intelligence, requires them to get outside the formal structures to get jobs done. So it's creating inefficiencies, leads to the emergence of informal networks based upon one-on-one personal relationships. Now, see, Follett said that's the better way to do things. And Hochschild is really saying Follett was right, Weber was wrong. Post-bureaucratic, the post usually means after, okay? Pre, before, post, after. So post, after bureaucratic alternative. So it should be interactive. Every worker takes responsibility for the whole, doesn't regulate relationships within the functional, lets people talk to people and become friends and have interpersonal relationships. The workers are determined by problems rather than predetermined by structure. So we might put teams together that can work on a specific problem. And those teams come from multiple functional areas of the organization. Adler and Bors, two types of bureaucracy, a type that enables work and a type that coerces work. It's the strength of bureaucratic form is its formalization. These processes can be either enabling or coercive. So they're saying that bureaucracies not in and of themselves are bad, but how you play it out can be one of these two, a dichotomy, okay? So in enabling bureaucracies, processes provide organizational memory, codify best practices, provide greater understanding of the whole work process and how each piece contributes to the whole. So we're not in our functional areas, we're seeing the bigger picture. Ashcroft talked about organized dissonance and feminist bureaucracy as a hybrid form. All right, so now we've talked about multiple alternatives to the Weberian model. Here we're getting one that uses feminist ideas. Throughout this book, you're going to get these, and you may think you know what feminist theory is, but you're going to see different forms of it here. This actually makes sense to me in certain bureaucracies, especially those with a high percentage of gender differentiation. So this particular article talks about bureaucracy can be viewed as a structural expression of male dominance. In many industries, the men are the predominant management force. In some industries, women are. So for example, in education, women have a larger role, especially in the younger grades. And think back to your own experience. Your grade school was predominantly women. It changed a little bit in high school, and it really may have changed in college. Collectivist structure are promoted by feminists, but have been difficult to sustain. Well, yeah. The idea of feminist bureaucracy is a hybrid form, halfway between. Balances control with more collectivist model of control, blends hierarchy, and encourages egalitarian models of power. Now, I'm not giving you all the details, but some of these articles are really interesting if you think about them in terms of your own organization. For me, the idea of a feminist bureaucracy, many higher education administrators happen to be women. And it does change the dynamics to, let's say, the industrial machine shop I used to work in. That was a very male-dominated structure. The whole way we do work is very different for both organizations. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. That's chapter 2.